Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time, Masechet Avodah Zarah. This week we are in our 6th class and we are reviewing Daf 36 to 42. We are continuing discussing different foods that are forbidden to eat if you buy it from an idolater, but you can get benefit from these things, meaning they are not involved, in general, not involved with idol worship. Rather, there is going to be a reason that we cannot use these items, either because we are concerned that they are not kosher, or for a different reason. So that's what we're going to be doing right now. Okay, so we are going to at the top of Daf 36. Okay, the top of Daf 36, we are talking about oil. So the Gemara talks about that we're not allowed to take olive oil. We're not allowed to take oil from a non-Jew. Again, as I said, non-Jew means idolater. Where do we learn this from? So we actually learn it from Daniel. Daniel was a prophet, and he decreed that it is forbidden to use oil from idolaters because the vessels that it was held in would secrete impure oil, or maybe the vessels would secrete non-kosher food, meaning that there was not kosher food in the vessels beforehand, and it would secrete into the oil the flavor of the non-kosher food. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda says it's actually okay, because even if the vessel was used for not kosher previously, what's in the vessel now, or whatever was absorbed, is already what we would call spoiled, and therefore when it gives back that flavor, the flavor is spoiled, right? The word in Hebrew is ta'am lifgam. The flavor that is going to be imparted by these vessels, even if it's from non-kosher food, it's not the food anymore. It's just the flavor, and the flavor is already bad. It's spoiled. So that doesn't count as making something not kosher, and therefore it would be okay. Daniel, so now since we mentioned Daniel, so the Gemara explains that Daniel decided not to eat. If you remember, or if you're familiar, Daniel lived with in Bavel, and he lived in the palace, and they would feed him food, and he refused to eat from the non-kosher food. He also said that he wasn't going to drink their wine or their oil. So that's how we see, and then the Gemara interprets this as not only for himself, but also for the Jewish people. He decreed that you cannot have not only wine, as we saw last week, but also oil from a non-Jew. Bread, oil, wine. So the Gemara says, bread, oil, wine, and the daughters are of the 18 things that they decreed between Hillel and Shammai, and it wasn't actually from Daniel. It was actually later. So the Gemara says, no, actually Daniel did decree this, but Hillel and Shammai also agreed with it, or extended the decree to the field and not only in the city. Okay, what does it mean, daughters of non-Jews? So we say that the daughters of non-Jews are considered impure from the sense of nida, from menstruation, but they're considered nidot from birth, even though obviously they don't have their periods that early. But what the rabbis were trying to do was preventing having relations with these non-Jewish women. the Gemara says that also we want to make sure that we want there to be distance between the Jews and the idolaters. Another reason that they made a decree, right? So they made a decree on bread and oil, because again, these things were not used for idol worship, but they were used by the idolaters themselves. So they made a decree so that you don't drink from their wine. Remember, if you're gonna, go over to their house and have some lunch, you might have some wine, and then that's a problem. Why is that a problem? Because you're gonna get so friendly with them that you're gonna want to marry their daughters. And if you marry their daughters, they're gonna get you to do Avodah Zarah, idolatry, right? So it's one thing can lead to another, can lead to another. So we say that there is a biblical prohibition to marry the daughters of the 7 nations that lived in Israel before the Jews came into Israel. For the other nations, there's a decree that you can't marry them, but it's not biblical. Or no, even biblically, you cannot marry the daughter of a non-Jew. And not only can you not marry her, but you cannot have relations with her either. Okay, one would think that that would go together, but in case you didn't, it's a separate thing, right? We learn it from Yehuda and Tamar, and the Gemara continues that, right, even a non-Jew living with a non-Jewish man living with a Jewish woman is also forbidden. It seems that it's not forbidden for a Jewish man to be with a non-Jewish woman, biblically, but then they made a decree that was forbidden as well. Or, as we said again, even biblically, deoraita, it is also a problem, right? And you're not allowed to sleep with them, right? We just had the story a few parshiot ago of Kazbi and Zimri, right? They were having relations very publicly. The Gemara said maybe then the decree was that you can't even do it privately. Or maybe the decree was made by the Hashmonaim, by the Hasmoneans, that maybe they made the decree that the Jews can't be, again, with the non-Jewish woman, but they didn't decree about yichud, right? Yichud is secluding, right? We're saying that you can't marry them. We're saying that you can't sleep with them. Not only that, but you can't be alone. You can't be alone with the non-Jewish woman as well. Again, because if you're alone in a room, it could lead to inappropriate behavior. The Gemara says, wait a minute. We have another Gemara, which we actually learned already, that David, right, King David decreed this mitzvah or this prohibition of secluding from one another. So the Gemara says David made the prohibition, the decree that you can't have yichud with Jews, and then the Rab, meaning a single man and woman shouldn't be alone in a room together because we're concerned for inappropriate behavior. And then the rabbis came and made a decree that even with a non-Jew is forbidden. Then the Gemara says, wait a minute, but yichud is actually deoraita. It actually is in the Torah. So the Gemara says, you're right. In the Torah, it's talking about secluding with a married woman. David decreed for a single woman. And then Hillel and Shammah came and added for a non-Jewish woman. So we're basically what the Gemara is showing the halachic process on how the halacha developed from the time of the Tanakh all the way through Jewish history, which I think is really fascinating. The Gemara continues with, again, trying to create barriers between the Jews and the non-Jews. The Gemara says that the Jewish children shouldn't hang out with the non-Jewish boys so that, again, there won't be any inappropriate behavior. Again, same sex or opposite sex. And again, from what age, right? So for boys, it's from age 9. From girls, it's from age 3. Then the Gemara talks about the concept of a court allowing a certain process, a certain action. And the Gemara says that if a court, a beit din, allows, 2 or maybe 3 things, they're called like a very lenient beit din. So the top of Daf 37 speaks about Rabbi Yehuda Nisia, who permitted having oil from non-Jews. And they said, wait, if you're going to permit oil, why don't you permit bread as well? And he said, no, I don't want to take it too far because they're going to call me, right, too lenient, right, like a permissive court. So then the Gemara says, oh, what were the other things that Rabbi Yehuda Nisia allowed? So he actually allowed a woman to remarry, meaning that she can marry somebody else. She doesn't have to do yibum, based on a get that was given on condition that the husband would return within 12 months, but the husband died before the date. Now, really, we would say that that document is invalid because he wasn't there, right? He said, your divorce is valid only if I return within 12 months. Sorry, if I don't return within 12 months. And sorry, if he would return within 12 months, and he didn't, but he died. And then the question is, right? We learned in Masachet Gitin that a get, a divorce, cannot happen after death. Once the husband dies, that's it. There's no more get. So here, Rabbi Yehuda Nisia ruled that actually, in this case, when he said that he would give the divorce after 12 months, he really meant from now, but really in 12 months, meaning, and there's this concept of like from now, which means that it is actually permissible. That's according to Rabbi Yehuda Nisia. Since we're talking about get, the Gemara continues. Let's say a husband says, you're divorced when the sun rises. So, and then let's say he dies the night before. So it's invalid because he was saying it's only valid in the morning and he died and he wasn't around in the morning. Therefore, it is invalid. But if he says you're divorced on condition that the sun rises tomorrow, that's valid because on condition really means from now, me'achshav, and therefore it is valid. The question is, what if he says, if the sun comes out tomorrow? So that's a machloket, right? Is it, if he says if, does it mean from now? Because we look at the date on the document, or does it mean when? And only when the sun comes up would they be divorced, and if he died, so then it would be invalid. Okay, next. So now we have, okay, Yossi ben Yoezer reported that certain grasshoppers are permitted, but everyone else said that it was forbidden, and he was called, right, too lenient, right, too permissive. So the Gemara explains that there are 4 types of grasshoppers. And then the question is, are they descriptive, like anything that looks like those are fine, or only those 4 are kosher? And that is the machloket. Then, so he permitted them. This is like these long-headed grasshoppers. He also permitted liquids from the butchering place in the temple, in the Beit HaMikdash. He said that they were pure, they were tahor. And 3, he also said that if you touch a dead body, you become tameh. But he is, right, but wait a minute, isn't it already, we know that if you touched a dead body, you'd be tameh. So the Gemara says, no, the case is actually, biblically, deoraita, if Reuven touches a dead body, and then Shimon touches Reuven, so then Shimon is pure, is tahor. And Rabbanan said, no. Shimon is also impure. And then Yossi ben Yoezer came and said, no, actually Shimon is pure, meaning he went back to the original biblical understanding. So the Gemara says, also this could be talking about if they're touching at the same time, or maybe one after the other, and if it would be if that would be the case. Another option is that he allowed, when we have a doubt about impurity in the public domain, so he said that it is permissible, but the Gemara says, wait a minute, we already know that it's permissible. So the Gemara says, you're right. It is a halacha Moshe Sinai. It's a mitzvah that we got from Moshe, that you would be pure, right? Or you're permitted if there's a doubt about impurity in a public space. But they didn't really publicize that ruling. And Yossi ben Yoezer came and he publicized it. Okay, now the Gemara talks about cooked food by idolaters. Even if it's in kosher pots, you still can't eat it because the non-Jew cooked it, right? This is what we call bishul akum, right? Bishul akum stands for Ovdei kochavim umazalot, which means idolaters. So even if a non-Jew cooks in a kosher pot, that is not, you're not allowed to eat from it, but you could get benefit from it. This is learned from the war with Sichon, and basically they offered to buy their food and their water. And why did it say food and water? It could only be that they could buy raw food from them, not something that was cooked, because if it was cooked, it would be problematic. Okay, Daf 38. The question is this only de Rabbanan? Is this only rabbinic? Or is it even, is it only rabbinic, or is it de Oraita? Is it from the Torah? So then the Gemara explains that any food that can be eaten raw, there's no issue, even if it was cooked by a non-Jew. Again, in kosher pots. I'm not talking about in non-kosher pots, but in kosher pots, if it could be eaten raw, then it's okay. Or another criteria could be any food that isn't served on the table of a king, right? If it's something that's very simple, then that's not considered like food, and therefore there's no issue of bishul akum, of food that's cooked by a non-Jew. Okay, we'd mentioned yesterday in the last week that there were these small salted fish. You can eat them. You can eat them if they're salted, because salting isn't, it's not bishul akum. But if it's fried with flour, then it's not okay, because then it's cooking. Let's say the non-Jew lit a fire in a meadow, and it roasted all the grasshoppers, right? They're very excited about these grasshoppers. So then the question is, can you eat those grasshoppers? Because on one hand, the non-Jew cooked them. On the other hand, he didn't mean to cook them. So maybe because maybe you can't eat them because you can't recognize what type of grasshopper it is, not because of bishul akum. Or maybe it is considered cooking. Right, again, if the non-Jew didn't intend to cook it, then even if he did add to the fire, it's not considered bishul akum. Now we're going to get to, I would say, the things that are permissible, right? If a Jew put the meat on the fire and then the non-Jew just flipped it over, that is okay. Even though he hastened the cooking, that's not considered bishul akum, right? Anything that's cooked, even a little bit, what we call in the Gemara kema'achal ben drusai. If you remember, we mentioned this, we learned this in Masechet Shabbat, was a long time ago. Ben Drusai was actually a thief, and he used to eat his food like really, really raw, because they didn't have time to like sit and cook. So some say it's a third of the way cooked, some say it's a half of the way cooked. But if it's already cooked by a Jew, that minimum amount, a half or a third, then even if the non-Jew cooks it more, it's not considered bishul akum, right? And here's where we get the concept, the Gemara continues, that if a Jew, right, lights the fire, if the Jew put the pot on the stove, if at any point a Jew was involved in the cooking, then it's not considered bishul akum, and you can eat from it. And that's how a lot of people get, I don't want to say around this prohibition, but that's how we make these things permissible, right? So if you have a non-Jewish cleaning lady or housekeeper, and she's going to cook for you, if you light the fire or you do some part of the cooking, she can do the rest of it. Okay. Then the Gemara talks about boiled oil. So if the oil was boiled, then it is forbidden, not because of the cooking, but because of the pot, meaning if it was in a non-kosher pot, or as we mentioned before, maybe it's okay because of the concept, as we mentioned, noten ta'am lifgam. It gives a bad taste, and that bad taste is not considered food or good taste. Therefore, it would be okay. Okay, there was what about pickling, right? So pickling is forbidden. Like if you buy pickled vegetables from a non-Jew, it's forbidden because sometimes they would put wine or vinegar in it. And here vinegar probably means wine vinegar. And therefore it is forbidden, right? So if you know that they use wine, it's forbidden behana'ah. You can't even get benefit from it. If you don't know, so then it is permitted to get benefit from it. Daf 39, you're not allowed to buy this like cut up fish from the non-Jews, because again, we don't know what kind of fish it was. Also fish brine, again, we don't know what fish it came from, therefore it is prohibited. If the fish doesn't have scales, right, again, to make what is a kosher fish? A fish that has fins and scales. Let's say the fish doesn't have scales now, but the scales are going to grow later. I guess it's part of their development. That is permitted. If it has now and they're going to fall off, it is also permitted. Then the Gemara talks about buying caviar, right? Fish eggs. And in a certain place, so in Caesarea, they said you can buy all caviar because all the caviar there came from kosher fish. But again, if you only know fins and scales, it doesn't help you when you're looking at caviar. You don't know where it came from. This is, of course, in the time where there are no labels on food, right? People are just, selling barrels of things, so you don't know what's on them or in them. The Gemara says sea donkeys are permitted, but sea oxen are forbidden. I don't know what they are referring to. So these are different types of sea creatures. There were stories of rabbis who came to town, and the people in the town showed them different fish to see if they were kosher or not. Okay, the next thing in the Mishnah said chiltit. You're not allowed to buy chiltit from a non-Jew. This was some sort of sharp vegetable, sharp in the sense of what we call harif in terms of like an onion or garlic. Maybe spicy is the word I'm looking for. In halakhic terms, we use the word harif to say that it's not like a regular vegetable. Why? Because if you use a non-kosher knife to cut this vegetable, the fats that are absorbed in the knife are going to be drawn out by this vegetable, which is why it's problematic to eat onions, garlic, things like that from a non-kosher restaurant, even though one would say, what's the big deal? It's just a vegetable. But the concept is that because these are sharp foods, they draw out the fats that are absorbed in the non-kosher knife, and therefore it is not kosher. Okay. Then the Gemara talks about non-Jews who work for Jews, right? So the servant of a Torah scholar is considered like a Torah scholar. Therefore, they can be trusted, meaning, right, the rabbis would have servants in their house. They trusted those servants to prepare their foods, to say that this is kosher, this is not kosher. And the Gemara says, even after that Torah scholar dies, that Eved, that servant, is trustworthy, right? Because they were part of the household for so long. So too, a woman who's married to what's called a chaver, right? There's two types of, I would say, two groups that are mentioned in the Gemara. Chaver means someone who keeps mitzvot, keeps the Torah, and then an am haaretz, who does not keep mitzvot either out of ignorance or out of, I don't want to say spite, I'll just say doesn't want to keep the mitzvot. So the question is, what about the wife of one of these people? Like, is she trusted? So the Gemara says the wife of a chaver can be trusted even after the husband dies. The wife of an am haaretz, who, right, so she was married to, let's say, someone who is not religious, and then she marries somebody who is religious, or the daughter of an am haaretz, right, not religious, who marries a religious person, when they go into that relationship, they need to accept upon themselves that they're going to keep the mitzvot, right? They have to accept being a chaver. And once they do, they're considered trustworthy. But, right, the wife of a chaver who marries an am haaretz, right? So she was religious, and then let's say she's still religious, but she marries someone who isn't, or the daughter of a chaver who marries an am haaretz, they're still considered a chaver, meaning it's interesting, right? Like, it goes according to your upbringing. If you were brought up being religious and it's something that you took on for yourself, then even if you marry someone who's not religious, we trust you when you say, oh, right, I did this the proper way. Or another opinion is, no, they need to accept chaverut again, right? They have to say that they are going to keep the mitzvot. The Gemara then discusses different foods that need a double seal when they're given to non-Jews. So milk, wine, meat, tchelet, and the following things only need one seal: chiltit, murias, bread, cheese. Again, the question is, are we concerned that they are going to, right, if you say, can you please watch my, bread, are we concerned that they're going to open up your package, eat your bread, and put their own bread inside, right? The more expensive the item, maybe less, we're less concerned. And the Gemara discusses where we are concerned about these things. Okay, the next Mishnah on Daf 39 tells us that the following foods are mutar, right? So we did asur because of idolatry and you can't get benefit. We said asur to eat, but can get benefit. And now totally mutar. What are these things? Milk from a non-Jew, but a Jew was watching him. This is what we call with a mashgiach or hashgacha, right? Somebody watched the non-Jew milk, and therefore you know that it's only from a cow, right? Some people think, oh, it's because the rabbi blesses the milk. The rabbi doesn't need to bless the milk. We just need to make sure that it's from a kosher animal, right? Honey and grapes, even if they're dripping wet, they do not become, that you buy from a non-Jew, they do not become susceptible to impurity. Pickled foods that don't have wine, remember we said sometimes they had wine in it. If you know for sure they do not have wine in it, then it's okay. Whole fish, olives, and certain types of grasshoppers. So now the Gemara explains, again, as long as the Jew is watching the non-Jew milk the cow, then it's okay. Even if there are non-kosher animals in the flock. And it could be that, let's say, if the Jew stands up, he can see the non-Jew, but if he sits, he can't see them. That's okay, because the non-Jew is going to be afraid to try any tricks, because he knows at any moment the Jew can stand up and see him. And this is actually the source for the concept of what's called in Hebrew yotze v'nichnas, a mashgiach, what's the word? Mashgiach, supervisor, someone who is supervising that the kitchen is kosher. So one opinion is that the supervisor, the mashgiach, needs to be there all the time. Another opinion is that you can do what's called yotze v'nichnas. You say, hey, I'm your supervisor, I'm the mashgiach, and I'll be around sometime today, right? And you don't tell them when, and they don't know when you're coming. So because they're constantly, oh, maybe he's coming now, maybe he's coming now, they're not going to do anything put in non-kosher food when they're not allowed to. And therefore, that is enough, and that is seen as a good hashgacha. Honey is kosher. Why? Because you can't mix wine into it. Remember, wine is what we're really concerned about, because that's what they used for idolatry. So you can't mix wine with honey. It would make the honey bad, and therefore it's not a problem. We're not concerned that it's for cooking, like bishul akum, because it can be eaten raw. So then even if they heated it up, it is not a problem. Okay, we said you can buy a whole fish from the fishmonger because you can recognize the fish. What does it mean, a whole fish? So one opinion is you need to be able to see the head and the spine, or maybe you need the head or the spine, right? A kosher fish, you need to be able to see the scales and the fins. But if you see the head and you can recognize what type of fish it is, so then that would be enough. Daf 40 says, let's say you have a barrel of fish, and one of them has the simanim, right? It has the fins and the scales. So then you can eat all the fish that's in the barrel, right? As long as they all look alike. Because the idea is that they would put all of the same fish in the same barrel. One rabbi actually said that you can eat all the fish in the fishing boat because of this idea. Another said, no, don't, that's a little bit too much. Okay, now speaking about caviar. So I don't know enough about caviar, but first the Gemara says that only kosher fish lay eggs, therefore all caviar is kosher. That's not true. The Gemara says, wait a minute, no, that's also not true, right? Also non-kosher fish do lay eggs, but it hatches already inside the fish, and like the fish kind of gives birth to fish instead of eggs. If someone wants to Google that, let me know if that's true. Then the Gemara talks about the signs of what is a kosher kosher egg, like from a bird. So it has to be elliptical, meaning one side is round and one side is pointed. That's how you know that an egg is kosher. If it's totally round, it is not kosher. But again, don't forget, right? In those days, things are not labeled. So you go to the shuk and there are eggs. How do you know where they came from? So the Gemara gives us ways to know. Another is if the yolk is on the outside and the white is on the inside, that's not kosher. And if it's all mixed up together, that's a reptile's egg, and that's also not kosher. Okay. Next, the olives, we said you can eat from a non-Jew. Even if they're soft, we don't have to be concerned that maybe there was wine put into it. But if it's really soft, meaning if you hold it and like the whole thing falls apart, then we assume that wine was added and you're not allowed to eat it. Okay, the Gemara talks about apple cider. I'm assuming apple cider vinegar. I thought it was fascinating because you know that's all the rage nowadays. So apparently it was also 2,000 years ago. The Gemara talks about apple cider vinegar used for healing for stomach issues. You are allowed to buy it from a non-Jew, and the assumption is that it does not have wine in it, and therefore it is kosher and you can buy it. That is the end of the second chapter, and with that we finish the discussion about kosher, non-kosher food, bishul, akum, all those things. And now we're actually going to get to a discussion about idols, statues, and actual Avodah Zarah. Well, not yet, but close to that. So the Mishnah says at the bottom of Daf 40, all forms, right? So I'm not talking about an idol, I'm talking about like a statue. Right, so all forms, if I don't know if they were worshipped, they are still forbidden to get any, benefit from, or because the Mishnah says they were worshipped at least once a year, or they are permitted because they are permitted unless they have a staff or a bird or a ball in their hand. Or maybe if it's, as long as it's holding something, it means that it's going to be worshipped. So now again, it's important to understand, you Jew are walking down the road and you get to a city and you see a statue. Now, you don't know who the statue is. You don't know, right? It could be Zeus. It could also be the governor. So because you don't know, that's why our Mishnah is having this discussion. So the Gemara explains, Rabbi Meir suspects for the minority. This is something that he is consistent in, right? In general, we say we go according to the majority, right? Most statues are not worshipped as idols. Some statues are, and therefore Rabbi Meir says, because some statues are, I have to be concerned that maybe this one was worshipped. Therefore, you're not allowed to get any benefit from this statue. But the rabbis say, no, we only go according to the majority. So the Gemara explains on Daf 41, they used to make statues of the king, and they would put it at the entrance of the city. Right, because it was important, and these are forbidden because the assumption is that they would bow down to this statue. There's a machloket at the entrance to a village, or maybe at the entrance to the big city. It's okay because we assume it's just for beauty, right? Anyone who's ever gone to major European cities, but right, Rome, there's statues all over. Not necessarily things that were worshipped. They're just pretty, right? But if it's in a village, maybe we should assume for sure it's an idol, right? Because they don't have enough money to make just pretty statues. And therefore, if it's in the village, it's for sure forbidden. Okay, why did we say that if it's holding a staff, it's considered and something that was worshipped? Because it shows the importance of the statue, right? If you're holding a staff, it shows that this person controls the world with a staff. Or, right, the bird, you control the world like you caught a bird. Or, right, the ball is the symbol of the earth, right, which makes me think of, right, when they coronate in England, right, they hold the ball and the staff, right, again, showing power. So here we see it as something, right, that will be worshipped, right, a sword or a crown or a ring. All of these ideas show importance. Okay, the next Mishnah is going to discuss the topic or the concept of, in Hebrew, it's called bishul Avodah Zarah, which means to nullify an idol. Okay, a non-Jew can take away the idol status of a statue if the non-Jew breaks the statue. Okay, right? So if you have a statue of, right, Zeus, and the non-Jew is like, ugh, Zeus, I hate you, or I don't like this, right, thing anymore, and he throws it on the floor, now a Jew can use those pieces of pottery or whatever, marble, because the non-Jew nullified the, right, idleness of the statue. Now, a Jew is, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so the Mishnah says, if a person finds broken pieces of an idol, you can use them because we assume that a non-Jew broke it. If you found a hand or a foot, you cannot use it because sometimes they would just bow down to the hand or the foot. Like maybe the hand and the foot are just the idol, and then you cannot use it. Okay, so now the Gemara explains, even if it was worshipped before, as long as it's broken now, so then you can use it. Now, even the hand and the foot, even though it's broken, so the Gemara actually clarifies, if it was put on a pedestal, then you can't use it because then it shows that it's important. But if it was not put on a pedestal, then we assume that it was broken and nullified. If the idol broke on its own, so then it is still forbidden because the non-Jew didn't nullify it. Or maybe it's okay because we assume that the non-Jew nullified that idol when it broke, right? So he had this thing of Zeus, it fell on the floor, and the non-Jew is like, ugh, I didn't like that one anyway, right? Meaning the idea is that we assume that once the non-Jew sees the idol broken on the floor, he's like, ugh, I don't need it, and therefore it is nullified. More than that, the Gemara says that the non-Jew actually says, oh, I thought you were so strong, Zeus. If you broke, obviously you're not so strong anymore. So I don't believe in the power of this idol. Okay, so then the Gemara brings up the story in Shmuel Aleph of the when the Plishtim, the Philistines, took the Aron, the ark, and put it with their idols, and then in the morning they woke up and all the idols, right, were broken. And it says that they didn't walk on the threshold because of the pieces of the idols that were there. So the Gemara is like, oh, you see, they still like revered those broken pieces. The Gemara says, no, they actually worshipped the threshold and not the pieces because the pieces were broken, showed that they didn't have any power. Then the Gemara says, actually, our Mishnah is speaking about broken pieces of a statue and not of an idol, meaning not something that we know is worshipped. But the broken pieces of an idol, they're still forbidden because, again, we know for sure they were worshipped, and maybe the non-Jew nullified it, and that's called, right, in the Gemara, right, vadai, something for sure, against safek, something we have a doubt about, if that goes one against the other, we go according to what we're sure about. You're for sure it was an idol. We're not sure if it was nullified. Therefore, we keep it in idol status. And from there, 42, the Gemara doubt overrides what's for sure. And then the Gemara is like, no, each case really it's for sure versus for sure, or maybe versus maybe, and it doesn't prove in the other way. Okay, a non-Jew can nullify his own idol or even his friend's idol, but a Jew cannot nullify a non-Jew's idol, right? Only if he dented the idol, but if it really broke, then actually it would work, right? If a non-Jew dents his idol, that is valid, again, but not for the Jew to do it. Really, so the Gemara says, really, the dent by a Jew actually works, but they made a decree that it isn't valid to prevent the Jew from picking up these pieces. Again, we don't want him taking the idol for himself. Okay, let's say a non-Jew uses rocks from Marcolis. Marcolis was an idol or a god that was worshipped by throwing rocks at it. So the rocks are part of the worship. So if a non-Jew took one of these rocks and used it for paving the road, that's valid bishul. That's a valid nullification of the idolatrous nature of these stones. And a Jew can get benefit from that road. But not if a Jew does that. If a non-Jew shaved off some wood chips from a tree that was worshipped, right, in the time of the Mishnah, the Gemara, also in the time of the Tanakh, there's something called an Asherah. Asherah was a tree that was worshipped for idolatry. So if the Jew cut off some of the tree, so then the Jew can use the tree and the chips, because he now not only invalidated the tree because he's using it for firewood, he can also use the wood because he invalidated the tree. But if he like just prunes the tree to make the tree nicer, so then you cannot use the tree because it shows that he still cares about the idleness of the tree. But the chips, when he takes off, is okay. A Jew can grind up a metal idol and scatter the powder, and that is seen as bitul. Or maybe he has to put it into Yam HaMelach, to the Dead Sea. I always thought it'd be very cool to dredge up to see what's at the bottom of the Dead Sea. Did they actually throw all these things into the Dead Sea? It's a good question. Okay, you cannot plant under an Asherah, under a tree that was worshipped in the winter, because you can't plant in the winter under a tree that was worshipped, because the leaves are going to fall down and fertilize the plant, and now you're getting benefit from a tree that is idolatrous. A nest of that was in an Asherah can be used for firewood, right? Assuming that the twigs are from another tree, or maybe you want the chicks that are in the nest, or maybe you want the eggs. Okay, the last Mishnah for today. Let's say you find a utensil with pictures around it, or engraved on them, of a sun or a moon or a dragon. We assume that this was used for idolatry, and you have to throw it into Yam HaMelach, or only if they are dignified utensils. But if they're common utensils, then you can use them. So the Gemara explains that a non-Jew would worship really anything, right? Anything in the world. But for utensils, they would only paint these particular figures on utensils. Other pictures were just ornaments and not seen as idolatrous, right? So constellations are okay, just not the sun and the moon. faces are okay, just not the face of man, and images are okay, just not the image of a dragon. And if you find it already on the utensil, but right, you can't, right? So, all these things are okay if you find them on a utensil, but you can't put them on a utensil. Also, maybe problematic is a nursing woman, right? Again, they had a lot of like fertility gods. So that would also be problematic if you found that on a vessel. Okay, with that, we finished this week's daf. And I see we have a few more minutes. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions, and also want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom and an easy, I should say, a meaningful Tisha B'Av. I don't know if I've ever mentioned, but if you're interested, I started uploading a weekly Dvar Torah, a short Dvar Torah onto Spotify or onto Apple Podcasts. It's called Torah with Tamara. And I upload a weekly Dvar Torah. So I just actually uploaded something for Tisha B'Av. But if you're interested, that is online and you guys can listen to it.
Can you send us a link or can you email us something?
You could just go on Spotify or Apple and you can just search Torah with Tamara.
Torah with Tamara. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Questions, comments? Idols?
Yes, when you do a sequel and you're adding to your Torah, then you can do tomorrow's Torah with Tamara.
Oh, I like that.
Nice.
Okay.
That's nice. Talk about tongue twisters.
Excellent.
Okay.
So
what I wrote in the chat was when you had said about not marrying. Well, you said about not being alone with a non-Jewish woman.
Yeah.
And then I was thinking about the fact that Ammoni and Moavi, but not on, they were not allowed to marry them, but you're allowed to marry the women. So
yeah, but and that mitzvah is about conversion.
Yeah, conversion.
Here we're talking about
idolatry.
We're talking about intermarriage.
Yeah.
So yes, and
right. So it just popped into my head, so I wrote it. So yeah.
And also there's just so much study going on, and the Torah portion that we just finished with the war against the Midianites and the women and children, both boys and girls, being saved. There's so many questions about that. Moses was very upset. This is not the instruction I gave you. And then, of course, all of the women that had not known a man, meaning the young ones, because there are old ones who haven't known, but anyway, it meant the young ones. And I asked my rabbi about the ages because of this strange mention of the 3 years versus the 9 years for boys and girls, where a 3-year-old girl does not have enough sophistication to be able to seduce, all these strange things. But when it said 3 years, I was asking him, did they use that at that time to figure out who is a young girl to be spared? And he said no. And he said that at that time they used the tzit, and they passed the women, all the females, in front of it to determine whether or not that female had known a man. And he was very rushed, and that may have not been his last word, or that was the first thing but I do remember that story, whether it was the same one or not, but I remember that. So, this idea of the ages and all the statuses can be, a lot to digest.
True. I think that there's a lot to say about this. First of all, I think ages in the time of the Torah and the Mishnah and the Gemara it doesn't jive with our modern sensitivities, right? So if we're talking about girls getting married at 10, 11, 12, to us, it's like crazy in those days, right? If you were living till only, right, 30, 40, 50, you know, you kind of had to get a move on. So when the Gemara talks about 3 and 9, it's talking about if those children have relations, right? If under 3, it would, right? Again, to modern ears, it sounds horrible. So I'm just going to, right? So if someone had relations with a girl who is under 3, that girl is still considered a virgin when she grows up. That's the understanding. After 3, if there was relations, she's already not a virgin anymore. I don't think that the Torah or the Gemara is saying it's a great idea to have relations with these girls. I don't think that's what they're talking about. But I think they were just trying to determine certain things. Also, vice versa, that for a boy, right, if the boy is under 9 and he has relations, it's not considered actually having relations, right, with anybody. Only from 9 and up is it considered like he's not a man and he's still not an adult, but I guess he's developed enough that it's considered relations. It's not, I don't think it's so much about da'at, like in terms of like understanding. I think it's more about like anatomically, again, in the time of the
I thought it was da'at. I thought it was understanding.
No, because no one's going to say that a girl who's 3 has da'at. I think it's anatomically. I think they're saying that like the hymen kind of regenerates or whatever. I don't think it's about that. I think it's anatomical. Because we have other discussions about children and da'at, right? When we actually recently, we talked about like, can a child be kuneh something, right? Can a child do business dealings, remember? And we said that if the child is smart, right? If they're smart enough to understand what's going on, then their business deal works. So I think this is a little bit different, but I'm not 100% sure. That's just the feeling I get. And as you said, like sensitivities aside, I think they're just trying to make certain delineations, but I don't think this is a moral conversation. So, yeah.
It's not a recommendation.
No. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. On that note,
have a meaningful fast, and we should be zocher to have Mashiach come quickly, keherfine, like a blink of an eye.
Yes, even today.
Amen. I'm ready.
Absolutely.
I
Yes.
am ready. Okay. Wishing everyone Shabbat Shalom. See you next week. Bezrat Hashem, same day and time.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.